On this episode of Ask Christian Counseling Associates, we'll navigate through personal stories of triumph, the complexities of trauma and abuse, and the interplay between our inherent nature and the nurturing we receive. From heart-wrenching anecdotes to enlightening conversations, join the podcast with special guest Allison Smith as we explore big life challenges and how to emerge from them stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Hey, welcome to the CCA podcast, and Allison, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here today. Why don't we just start out with talking about some of your background, let the folks out there get to know you a little bit, and probably, I don't know, where do you work for CCA here? Because you're a CCA counselor, and where is that all for you now?
I'm at the Greensburg office and the Jeanette office right now.
Okay.
And I actually enjoy both locations. They're very nice.
You like the locations
Yes,
of
I do.
CCA? Because we're in churches, and so each church is different, and those are two of our really great offices. That's good. Yeah, so we're in Westmoreland County in Pennsylvania, out of our 4-state region now. But this is like our home base. Yeah. So you're one of the people here on the Greensburg team, and it's a large team of counselors. How many people are in your group?
My group, there's about 6 of us, and it's funny. I was thinking about that this morning. There should be 7, but you stole somebody off of us.
We did.
So.
We did. So we have another Greensburg group. There's 2 because we split them in half, and so we have these supervision groups where we train and meet, and that's sort of like a unique thing with counselors. Yeah. So the general public might not know, but we work from appointment to appointment, and off camera you had said you worked 13 hours yesterday. Yeah. That's a common day for a counselor. So the way I used to work long days, I would see 12 clients back to back, and I would see nobody outside of the clients that I met with. So if there was other counselors around, you'd never see them.
Yeah, and that happens sometimes. We're right across the hall from each other sometimes, and we don't even see each other. Yeah, and I was, before I worked at CCA, I was at other group practices, and so the previous practice that I was at was there 10 years. And I can honestly tell you that apart from a few lunches, I never saw them. I really wanted to, but there was no way to connect. Yeah. There wasn't any kind of intentional meeting. And that's pretty much the normal for group practices. And so we know that that's not a Christian way of living. And that's not what we do here. And I really enjoy that because you and the organization itself encourages us to meet with people, to do things. We have our different functions and stuff that you try to always have a good, have us have a good time, and that's appreciated. Yeah,
like we're on our way to Nashville here in September. Are you going to Nashville?
I am not going. No.
Have you ever been there?
No.
You should go. Yeah. You could bring your whole family. And, so people bring family members. People will come by themselves, too, because maybe family members are not interested, and that's okay, But it's a great, so we go to the American Association of Christian Counselors, and that'll happen in Nashville one year, and then Dallas, Texas the other year. And there's like 7,000 people there, 7,000 counselors. And it's, a time of worship, and then they have the regular, training. But I've been to secular conferences too, and I can just tell you the severe difference, because when you get together at secular conferences, it's political. Oh yeah. And then this. I hope the general public hears this, because we don't engage in this, but what typically happens as their get-together time is they have an open bar after the meeting, and a lot of those counselors are getting drunk, like completely drunk. And
unhealthy behaviors.
Well, that's how they relate to each other, because you have to have some medium of coming together, so at our conferences or at a Christian conference, you'll have times of worship throughout the day, And then, times of celebration, we'll eat together. For CCA, we'll have an outing. So they have like a riverboat that cruises down.
You don't have to make it worse. I'm already jealous.
Yeah, but I could tell you that, people don't go to conferences because it's so awkward, especially people from the Christian community, because I could be at like a seminar on redistribution of wealth. And making reparations and things that, whether people agree with that or not, I'm sitting there like, what does this have to do with counseling?
Yeah,
So, you can tell that, and this is something normal. We talk about the field of counseling and psychology, and you'll find that I'm oftentimes critical of the things that are going on, because it's pretty wild in some places.
Yeah.
Now, I would also say to the public that, don't get me wrong, there are many people here who have just devoted their lives to helping others, and whether they're in the church or not.
Yeah.
So, I don't want that to be a blanket statement.
Yeah.
But what got you into all of this? Why did you become a counselor? Why did you come to CCA?
That's interesting. I originally, when I was younger, it was funny, I just told this to someone the other day, I wanted to be a hotel manager. And they said, why did you want to be a hotel manager? I have no idea, because I like the idea of handing out keys to people. I don't know why. And having a place for people to stay. And, I went through business. It wasn't all that great. And somewhere along the line, God told me that I needed to do something different, that I was good with listening and talking one-on-one with people. And I think at the time I wasn't quite aware of what it meant. And honestly, if I knew the work that it took, especially in Pennsylvania, to become licensed, I think I wouldn't have done it. I think I would have been afraid of it. But God knew what he was doing, because now I love it. And I'm glad I stuck with it, and I'm glad that I did it. It took me a lot longer because I didn't start until 2012. I was about 31. I started in that, got my bachelor's 2016, and started on my master's. I had to take a few years off because of some personal things, and I was real hesitant about coming back and finishing it because of what I had been through during those few years. But I had a good counselor. I was in counseling, and he said, my goal is to stick with you through this until you get back into school and you complete your master's, which he's still with me. And I'll be starting for my doctorate here at the end of this month. But it was a long road, and it was difficult because I was a single mom through the second half of my master's degree.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult.
So you were 31 when you came back.
Well, 31 when I started my degree for counseling. And then when I started back for my master's, 39, something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
39.
So there was a big break.
Yeah.
In between. Now, I didn't know that, but we've talked somewhat about your story. Do you want to share any of that?
It's just, I was married to an abusive man for 18 years, and he was a pastor, and it was very difficult because he was the one who brought me to Christ, brought me back, I should say, whenever I was in my early 20s. So it was hard for me to separate that.
So he was a pastor when you met him?
No, okay. He became a pastor after.
Okay, but he was involved in you coming to Christ.
Yeah, he was. And so it was hard for me to put together someone who brought me to a loving God to someone who hurts me in various ways, whenever he's not happy or I don't do what he wants me to do.
Yeah. And when you say abusive, you're talking extreme abuse.
It was all forms of abuse. I did end up in the hospital one time. My kids and I did stay at a domestic violence shelter one time, but I went back. Yeah. And I actually was not the one to leave him. He was the one to leave me. And if you know, which I know you know, but for the public, they might not know that with trauma, there is this addiction that can take place where the person who brings you the lowest also is the person who makes you feel the greatest. So it's this up and down in your emotions and in your mind. And it's similar to a drug addiction. They compare it to that, to where you crave that attention from the person who can make you feel the greatest, because you know they can also make you feel at your worst. And so I wasn't willing to let go. And I had a very, very bad break. And that's why I took those years off, because I knew I wasn't right. I knew, I went to a very dark place. Yeah. And it took a lot for me to come back. And now it's my, goal to help others. And I think that God knew when he called me to this, that was going to happen. Yeah.
Now, when you say dark place, I mean, would anything specific that you could share that would demonstrate that?
There were moments of just wanting to die, not thinking of hurting myself. I had my kids, and my kids are really the reason that really helped push me through. I really struggled with God. I really did. I had a sincere, I guess you could call it like a faith crisis. Because here's this person who says, he goes up in the pulpit and he preaches about, be Jesus to the world, love people, forgive people. But he was so critical of me. And it came to the point where he said I wasn't good enough for him. And I'm thinking, but you tell people to be like Jesus. So, and also I had this issue with God, if you knew this was going to happen, God, why did you let me marry him? If you knew he was going to hurt me, if you knew he was going to leave our family, why did you let this happen? And I struggled also at that time with God. Why don't you just appear to him like you did to Paul? Just appear and say, you're wrong. Why are you doing this? And it was a little selfishly motivated, part of it, because of that addiction. But then also through time, I recognized this wasn't just about myself. It was about my kids. They were the ones who really have the lasting effects from it.
Okay.
And I think this profession helped me help them. And they also helped me as well, which was surprising because it shouldn't be that way. And I think that's really what snapped me out of it. My kids were comforting me. And I recognized this is not how it's supposed to be. I should be able to manage this. And that's what pushed me to manage it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it helped you to be a counselor, to deal with this stuff. Now, I don't know what that's all about for you specifically. I find the same thing, though. You spend time, like, really thinking about, like, why things get messed up and what it means to overcome that. And, like, there's models and ways of doing things, but you really just spend time, like learning to want that.
Yeah.
And... So it does help. It does help being a counselor because you're always thinking about it. Like how should I really work this out? That's the way it is for me.
Yeah.
Was it something like that for you, or maybe something different?
It took me a little while. It did. But the more that I got into my schooling, the more I recognized, I really have not handled this well. And even though I felt like I had some justification, because we do. And we've seen that throughout culture, that whenever someone feels like they've been oppressed, they've been abused, that they can go, once they recognize that, then they go from being passive to the extreme opposite of being aggressive or being hateful, spiteful, bitter. And I struggled with that. And it took me probably about a couple years for me to really deal with a lot of that. Though I have the right to be angry, though I have the right to be bitter, do I want to carry that with me for the rest of my life? And I had to lay that down. And I had to say, anger serves a purpose. And it did serve me for a time. It motivated me to move forward, motivated me to speak up for myself finally. But eventually you have to recognize it's just a defense mechanism. You have to let it down and still live your life and be happy instead of being angry.
So you found yourself angry and definitely was not good to be hanging on to that. That'd be important for a lot of people to hear. It makes sense rationally, but there's a lot of people going along with anger as a lifestyle.
Yeah, well, it's a trauma. It's one of the trauma responses is anger. Yeah, definitely.
So you're really trauma informed. You look at this as, because definitely, what you're describing is traumatic for sure. And why did God let this happen? Why didn't He intervene? What did you find out about that?
Trust. I didn't trust him.
Tell me more, because I know that there must be so many people out there who are saying, oh, yeah, like why does God let this happen to me? My life has been ruined.
It's funny because I was thinking about the why question. We ask why so many times, and sometimes it's hard for us to take in that we might never know the why, but instead of asking why, the what now. Instead of why, change it to what now. And that's what I had to do. Even though I didn't want to accept what was happening. I didn't want to accept that my life was like this. And sometimes, I'll be honest, even now I still struggle with, we had an entire church pretty much shun my kids and I. It was very hurtful.
Do you want to mention the church's name? Is that appropriate?
Oh, I would love to, but I'm not going to. No. That would be my anger defense coming up. No, we're not going to go there.
Okay.
But we did. And so it was a multi-level of why, God? These are supposedly your people. Why are they doing this? And it was because at first, and I think that people get uncomfortable with when someone's angry, when someone's hurt. They don't know how to sit with them through the pain. They don't know how to say, you have every right to be angry, and I understand your anger. It's okay to feel angry right now because it was wrong. And people feel uncomfortable with that, especially a lot of times in the Christian culture.
How could you tell? Like, what would people do when they feel uncomfortable around you being angry? Like, what was their response to you?
You need to forgive.
So, advice. I'm going
Number
to
one,
tell
you
you
need
what
to forgive.
do.
Yep.
Like, you don't know.
Yeah, that's the number one thing. And you find that in,
So your response wasn't like, thank you so much. I do need to forgive. And, I didn't realize it until now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was really rough. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never ever seen that happen when somebody's giving advice.
Yeah. Not in that moment. And I had a couple well-intentioned friends saying, "Oh, but God's going to use this through you. Think of all the people you're going to be able to help because you went through this." In the moment, I didn't want to hear that. Yeah. I didn't want to hear that because in that moment, all I was thinking about was myself and my kids. All I'm thinking about, why does this have to happen to me?
Yeah.
Why do I have to be the one to help people? But it's true. It honestly came about to be, and now I'm glad that I was able to get to that point because I do use it to help people.
Yeah, and what you're saying is not something that's deeply theological, which sort of I was expecting to hear, so I want to comment on that. But the other thing is that I don't want people to think I'm like making light of like people trying to help in the church, but we do find that many people are confused about how to help somebody.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me, but I've been so long as a counselor, like actually studying how do you help somebody, that it's not something that I take lightly or would say I don't know, but maybe I did in the beginning. Like that's why I started out on this, is I didn't know, and what we coach people here to do is that people don't need our solutions. They are going to have to choose their own solution, and people are smart enough and a lot of times smarter than we are.
Yeah.
They're going to choose, we can walk alongside somebody, because this all starts out that when you're in pain, you get isolated and it's like you're alone.
Yeah.
And the people are backing away from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the people who were once your friends are now against you. It might not be for real, but it could really seem like that.
Mm-hmm.
And all kinds of other stuff that's like messed up in your mind. And we've learned that when we listen to somebody and we can connect with them and that they can get a sense that they're connected to somebody else and that's safe and that they can trust someone.
Yeah.
That things start to open up and people can discover where they're really hurt and start to realize what needs to happen. And you don't need to tell them what to do, but that kind of connection is vital. And for whatever reason, it a lot of times doesn't happen in groups of people in the church, or certainly even more so just in society or your family, like that needs to be repaired. Like once you stop trusting people, or you're angry, or you're caught up in some addiction, or you're just super depressed, you name whatever, you're traumatized. It seems to be across the board. So, what you're describing, I bet you just a ton of people, if they really looked at themselves, would say, yeah, like I'm going through something similar. And the people trying to help seems like they're hurting me. And
I think, with society and with family, sometimes they encourage us to continue in that anger. And, you're right. You have every right to be angry. I mean, you look at what has happened culturally throughout, throughout history, but the past few years. People get upset about something and they connect with it. So we see something online, we connect with it because, their experience is something, it stirs up feelings inside of us from an experience we've been through, or just empathy. And we feel they have every right to be angry. They have every right to go and, protest in the streets and tear down things and everything. And there needs to be a safe place of letting that emotion out without it going into behaviors that are unhealthy for yourself or for others, other people around you. And I think that's what I really needed to recognize, in myself. The behaviors that I'm having aren't healthy. The feelings that I'm experiencing are normal, and I should feel that way, at least for now, but the behaviors are not. Yeah. And there's a saying by someone that I heard, and I honestly forget his name, but he's a therapist. He said hysterical acts usually have a historical reason or a historical backing.
Hysterical acts usually have a historical reason. I like that.
Yeah.
I was going to come up with another one, but
another cliche.
I like hurt people.
Well,
how about that?
Yeah, I like that one too.
But all of it.
But it's the truth. It's the truth. When we act out of proportion from, what we're going through, or our emotions are taking us to places that we probably shouldn't be behaviorally, it has to do with something in our past. So if we see that behavior moving forward, and I had to do that, it wasn't just, my marriage that caused this went back to my childhood. A lot of it went back to my childhood, my relationship with, my parents and people around me, rejection and everything. And I recognized I built up this behavior that whenever I'm rejected, I fly off the handle and I can't, I really suffer with this. Yeah. So I had to really examine that. And then that led me to, am I worthy in God? What's my identity in Christ? Yeah. And rejection by man, what does that mean? Because I'm never rejected by Christ. So what does that really mean to me? And who am I in Christ? Yeah. So it took me down a long road.
And I think sometimes people are surprised at this when they come for counseling. So although like what you described with this abusive relationship, certainly every counselor is out there saying that this needs to stop. But at the same time, like, you're here. I don't have the other person here. Mm-hmm. And if I did, I would be telling them directly, you need to stop, and I would do anything that I could. But the reality is that what's going to happen, for the person in front of us who is hurting, is that they are going to, take that damage and damage other relationships. And it's gonna lay everything that is vulnerable in you to bear, and that's how you get destroyed. Mm-hmm. Really, it's if the abuser doesn't get you, then it's going to be this long process of acting out that hurt on other people.
Yeah.
So I want to deal with the person in front of me. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, the person is coming saying, it's not me, it's the other person. And I'm like, I know, mm-hmm. And sometimes I have counselors on my case saying like we're going to take care of the person who's here. Mm. And that's what you're describing. Yeah. It's like I had to take care of what was going on with me to get over that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know whether that other person was going to change or not. It may never change. Mm. So that's pretty complicated for people to understand, I've found.
It's hard, yeah, because we do tend to, whenever we're the victim, we pass all the blame on them, which is on the abuser, which is To an extent, correct, but to another extent, how did we react in those situations? And are we, like you said, carrying it forward into our lives, or are we laying it down and saying, I'm going to learn and grow from this. I'm going to change the patterns that I had developed, which a lot of times are survival patterns. There were times when, and something I really struggled with, I had to lie sometimes when I was in that relationship to protect myself. There was financial abuse, and I was cleaning houses at the time. And so my pay was cash or check, and he would take my money whenever I'd be done. And there was more to it than just that. Both of us had made some financial decisions. So we had agreed he was going to be the person to take care of the bills. But then he wouldn't leave me with money for groceries or gas, and he would be gone for a week for work. I'd be running out of gas on the side of the road. So I started to protect myself. I would lie, and I would say, well, I only made 50 when I made 80, to have some, $30 for the kids and I for going back and forth to, whatever.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with that. That, to me, that made me a liar. I was doing something that I considered was a sin. And that was always brought up in my face by him and by people in the church. Well, you lied. Now, how can we believe you now? Because you lied. And because I lied to protect his reputation too. Like, I always praised him in public. So I had to really deal with that. And speaking with my counselor, he said, that was a survival behavior that you were trying to survive. And so now you have to reconcile, are you a liar, or did you lie to survive? Was that a protection behavior? And so do you have to carry that forward? Because people can continue that, I always have to lie to protect myself in every situation.
So just keep that going.
So keep that going, yeah. I was in an abusive relationship and I had to lie. So now when I'm late for work, I have to lie and make up an excuse. That's not necessarily the case. We can lay that down. We don't have to continue going on lying and take up that identity of I am a liar whenever it was a behavior that you learned in a survival situation.
Hello, I'm David Collins with Christian Counseling Associates, in particular the Foundation for Christian Counseling. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. Just talk to you a minute about what the foundation does and what we can provide. We strengthen the local communities, the families. We create this foundation. We do that through supporting marriages and marriage tune-up. We do that through supporting individuals in parenting and Christian active parenting. We also are community support, and obviously each of those people are located in the community, and so we seek to connect those folks with our partner churches. We really engage with helping people in those times, in those floods of their life where they're in crisis. And that crisis, we help to point them, we help to shine a light towards the foundation, the rock that is Christ. We really seek and aim to meet those people in crisis, to let them know that we care, that there's a way forward, that we can keep things accessible as far as support and help through the particular foundation grants that we offer. And that is just a bit about the vision and the mission that Foundation for Christian Counseling is after. Your giving transforms communities one family at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are plenty of imponderables, and that is to define that. Once you get into something, you don't know what's going to happen. And there's always something you didn't expect to happen that's going to happen, and you didn't know it. And so in these abusive situations, you end up taking positions on that you can't endorse. And then other people who could be supporting you are now against you.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that happens. Yeah.
And, I can guarantee you that nobody thinks about that. People are going through that.
Yeah. Right now, the big thing in Christian culture is deconstructing our faith.
Okay, tell me about that. We're deconstructing our faith.
That goes right into, this victim victims of abuse. So they are deconstructing their faith. And if you've, I don't know, am I allowed to bring up names of documentaries?
You can speak about anything you want. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, Shiny Happy People, it's a documentary on Netflix. And
I know that song. It's like an REM song, Shiny Happy People, holding hands.
So,
sorry.
I didn't put that together, but you're right. Yeah. Okay. Have you seen it?
It's a 90s reference. No, I didn't.
You didn't? Okay.
I'm sorry. Tell me about it.
So it has to do with abusive behaviors within Bill Gothard's ministry. He was popular evangelist, or whatever minister, basically a cult.
Okay.
And a lot of churches all over the nation, all over the world, just catered to that.
Now define for us what's a cult, because people are very confused about that.
Well, there's a documentary on that too.
You should watch this. You should watch this documentary. I'm gonna watch it.
But I just watched this the documentary about how to be a cult leader. But basically, it is taking on one person's mindset. Usually, there is one person involved that is the leader, and it usually involves abuse, and it usually involves oppressive behaviors and of that nature, or brainwashing. First there's love bombing, then there's the brainwashing, and then there's the gaslighting. This never happened, whenever things start to unravel. So a cult has a whole bunch of different intricate
and you know what I'm thinking about, and this is just I'll just share it with you, but it's that movie we were watching, what is it, Summertime or Midsommar. I almost I'm not recommending this movie. It's
very bad.
It's a very bad movie, but it's like they're on drugs and they go to this like European camp or something, and the people there are just slowly they find out they're insane, and that they're doing, they believe in all these things that are just not. It's like how would you describe this movie? Like, what do they believe in?
It was like the Swedish festival of like the summer solstice, and then the Swedish friend invited them down there to like hang out with his like family, but then it like deteriorated into this like cult where they like sacrifice people.
Yeah, they sacrifice the old people, and then they end up sacrificing all of his friends, and before you know it, you're caught up in this movie saying this is not going to a good place at all. But
it's like a train wreck, but you can't look away.
Yeah, but it was a cult for sure. Mm-hmm. It was like a paganistic drug cult.
Yeah. So that's the festival's real, but it's not a real cult.
The festival is real.
Yeah, but it's not. They don't.
Based on a true story.
It's not based on a true story. The story is made up. They don't actually.
So what's this called again? Midsummer. Okay, but we're not talking about So people, I think, when they think about a cult, would think about that. Mm-hmm. But then you have Christian cults.
You have Christian cults, yes.
And so we're from Western PA. At least you're from Western PA. Mm-hmm. You've always been in Western PA?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would say I don't know of many Christian cults here in the area, but in Ohio there's a couple of larger ones.
Yeah, so. I can't think of any. I mean, some people consider the Ku Klux Klan a supposed Christian cult.
Maybe they would be a cult like the Masons are a cult. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that can get real controversial.
Yeah.
Not the Ku Klux Klan, but the Masons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not talking about that necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
this is Christian culture. It was in the Christian culture, and it was pushed on churches. Or I shouldn't say pushed on churches, but it was accepted by churches. Bill Gothard's way of living. Yeah. And
let me say just clearly, mm-hmm. we reject any involvement in cults.
Yes,
it's a very, very bad thing.
Yes.
While we get into the details
Be free
of this.
thinking. Okay. Yes, think for yourself.
Do not get caught up in a cult. I hope this helps you.
So, the end result, of course, it all falls apart, and the main story behind that documentary is the what is that, 21 kids in county, the Duggar family. So they were highly involved in that ministry, in that cult. I don't like to call it a ministry, but anyway, they were highly involved in that. The end result from a lot of that, and if you watch the documentary, it also comes across as anti-Christian all the way around. So
they're tagging the church at the same time they're critical about cults.
If you really pay attention, yes. Yes,
Okay.
they are. Because this is made by secular people. Now, there are people in the documentary who are not necessarily, they don't believe that. You know, they are Christian. They have come out of that and they experience a freedom in Christ. You know, it's different. But what has happened, because a lot of that, you know, understanding the oppressiveness within, you know, which can happen in the church, people come about with deconstructing faith, and they deconstruct it down even past the foundation of Christ. And that's concerning, because they get so upset. They say, you know, oh, these Christian people, this Christian church oppressed me and abused me, so now I have to do away with my faith entirely, or I have to come up with my own.
Yeah.
And that's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
From a Christian mind, you know, biblical principles, it's unhealthy. We need to be able to look at everything and say, you know, this is wrong, and how they handled this is wrong, and they taught unbiblical things, or the way they taught things, even though they might be biblical truths, the way they taught the biblical truths was wrong. And instead, you know, maybe do some reconstruction, not deconstruct, because you know, a lot of people that are deconstructing are taking it so far that they're saying every single feeling that you have, you need to cater to. And we're not supposed to do that. Yeah,
it's a bad deal.
Yeah, that's being led by our feelings. And sure, it'd be great if we could live in a world where we live by our feelings, but that creates
and
so
psychology
much mess.
and counseling can become a cult like that.
Oh, yes.
We are going to make sure that you feel good.
Yeah.
And that is not the goal of counseling or treatment or anything like that.
Well, that's what we're seeing with a lot within psychology.
For sure. Yeah. So there was this other, just while we're on the topic of cults, and I don't know if you can look this up, Alex, but there was it was Christian Camp or something. This was a long time ago, maybe 10, 15 years. I don't know if you saw this one, but it definitely was a hit piece on the charismatic church. And I used to, one of my favorite things was Angel Network. Have I ever talked about Angel Network?
I know Angel Network, yeah.
I had Angel Network. And
I did too.
So it was across the country. You got every local Christian channel. And so, you know, I spent years watching that. It was the best thing. And then they went out of business.
Yeah.
It was very sad.
Yeah.
You know, but you did see some odd documentaries on there. like one was Hell House, where they did this like Halloween thing where the scary thing was.
They had that here, yeah.
I think, yeah, they have one down the road. I've never gone to it. And people were like, you know, and then it was Christian Camp or Camp Christian or something like that. And I don't remember a lot of it, but they had this one guy who he was a very popular pastor, and he was then caught up in some kind of inappropriate sexual behavior, busted, and you know, it was sad to see that. And he was in this film, and he was talking to these kids, and the kids were getting trained in speaking in tongues as kids in the church. Now, you know, I come from like a high steepled church as a kid, so that we would have been like, oh my gosh, you know, but you know. We had pastors who were saying, you know, parental guidance, you need to be careful to have your kids watch this, and really what it was showing was a sector of the church, and it was, you know, pretty honest about what goes on in the church. So they showed some dysfunctional moments of people,
and it still happens. That happened to my son. He was pressured into speaking in tongues.
Okay.
And he, you know, his experience was, you know, I just wanted them to leave me alone. So I just let it out. You know, I just said whatever just so they would leave me alone.
How do you feel about the gift of tongues?
I believe in it. I think it has a place.
Do you speak in tongues?
I pray in tongues.
Okay.
Not all the time. And sometimes when I don't, and it really is biblical, when I don't know what, I just let things come out, you know. So, but I don't, it's not something public that I do. And for people who do it publicly, that's, as long as it's in order, according to the Bible.
Somebody needs to be there to interpret, and you have to have a word from them if somebody's going to speak out in public in tongues. Yeah. Is that biblical?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I still kind of struggle with all that, but I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, that's their relationship with God. And
so when you say struggle, you think that they're just going blah, 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 blah?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. I think people like attention, and the church is a wonderful place to get attention.
It could be somebody seeking attention, or it could be a true spiritual language that we don't understand.
Yeah.
And that commonly happens in charismatic churches and in regular churches, whatever. Like I say charismatic because I came from a high steeple church, and so there was a plaque above the entryway to the worship center. It said silence. So
that's like a monk.
And if you raise your hand, they'd be like, "Put that hand down." So it was that has changed.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And that was just where, I grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. So it was very secularized and liberal. And I believe damaging. There's places where, I don't have the gift of tongues, or at least it was not practiced and strengthened within me. And so I've had people like guiding me along, and I just... it's not coming to me.
Yeah, and that's okay.
And I think that, like, if I was, if that was valued as a child, and I was brought along in that, maybe it would have been different.
I think it's pushed too much, because it's been, like in churches I've been into, it was taught as the sign of being baptized with the Holy Spirit. Well, I don't believe it is the sign. I believe there are many signs.
Yeah, so there's some churches that if you do not have that gift and speak in tongues, you're not baptized in the Holy Spirit, and therefore you're really not a believer.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the things that go on, is Christians not trusting other Christians.
Yeah.
Or they would be, that group would be saying, "You're not a Christian, I can't trust you."
Oh, that goes into so many things. I mean, we can, with spirituality in the church, there are so many people who take it to a realm of weird that it does not need to go to.
Yeah.
It does not. God's not weird.
I would hope that all kinds of people are listening to the podcast, and just, psychology people who just are interested for that conversation and not in the church, would be like, what is all this? Yeah. And, in the church, when you bring together any group of people, there's going to be some dysfunction. So I would say, this kind of conversation, it's like, are you Democrat or Republican? Well, if you're not the one I like, I can't talk to you. I really don't trust you. It would be the same kind of thing that happens in the church with some of the things that we believe. Yeah. And it can be political too. But the other thing though is the problem of sin, and this is so. Sometimes when we put any group of Christians together, or any group of people, what comes out of that is great and disturbing. And it's because what that is unlocking in us, if we follow that teaching, is sin is so terrible that it leads to death. And so it's never okay. And it'll have individual manifestations, where you can get that out of a person, or it can have group manifestations. So the group brings something out of somebody, and you're like, wow. However, you will never be in a group of people and not have that. Yeah. And it's the problem of, well, how did this get messed up? Why are we at war?
That's group dynamics, yep.
Yeah, so you can expect for that to happen, and some people are like, no, the church should be an absolute perfect place where nothing ever goes wrong, and because it did, I can't deal with that anymore. And
that's where a lot of people don't end up going back to church, because they think it has to be that way.
Yeah, I got hurt at a church, and the church is a spiritual family, so it's the same kind of thing as to say, like, I got hurt in my family, so I'm not going back to my family. And we're back to that deconstruction. Yep. You're starting to develop a design for living that God did not design. Yep. And it's very easy to get there when you're hurt. So this is very interesting to me. I wonder again what people think about it, but I'm willing to admit that church life is work. It's not something that the sky's going to open up and the sun shines through, and we're like, oh.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but the goal is to work together and to have grace for each other and to love each other. And I think sometimes, even when we're hurt, we tend to isolate. We tend to isolate, no matter who it's from. So, we read that article about isolation and how people are isolating more and more. Mm-hmm. And I read in there about the components of kids, in social media, and that has now gone not just from kids to adults. We are connected to our technology, and now we're spending all of our social interaction, what should be in a room full of people, on our phones, on our devices. And instead of it helping us, it has caused more and more depression and anxiety.
Yeah, we're super depressed because we're super isolated.
Yeah. And people think that pulling away from the church is the answer.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. No, you don't necessarily have to go to church to have Jesus, but it's a part of how he made us. He made us to be social creatures.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you just shared a lot. The beginning question we had is like, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I can really tell, because I think we could probably move on from the conversation, but that you had abuse from somebody who was a pastor, and you were able to move on from that without becoming jaded about the church. And you've seen great things happen, and also things that you need to be worked out. Mm-hmm. And that goes on to this day, I would imagine. There's still people around who are involved in that things need to be worked out. Mm-hmm. And so I would just say, as a sense of hope for people who would listen to this, that you could come here and we would understand that. And we're not going to give some advice out to say, well, just give up on it. Do what makes you feel good now.
Yeah.
It is that God has designed that as our spiritual family, and disconnected from that, there's isolation. Mm-hmm. And a ton of people have been hurt in relationships, and that hasn't been repaired. But in your case, that happened for you. Mm-hmm. And that, is part of your journey as a counselor.
Yep.
And that's why you're a counselor.
That is.
And you're bringing that to CCA. And, Allison is like a lot of our counselors here. We've had challenges in our life, and that's part of the expertise that we bring. We put it back together, by the grace of God, by the power of God, and by his design. And that becomes part of the counseling. Mm-hmm. And, all the science of psychology and the greatest stuff, we're doing that too. Mm-hmm. And we're keeping the garbage out. Yeah. I don't know what else you want to talk about, Allison. I had a whole bunch of things here that I just wanted to see what you thought about.
Okay.
And I guess one of the things I always just, we're just back on the topic of getting to know you and letting the audience see that. You were the Word of Life connection. You were once at Word of Life, and I don't know, you're not at that church, right?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm still connected. They supported us through a lot of what we went through, my kids and I. They're so supportive of my kids that I was amazed. And I have a lot of good friends there. But, again, he's still connected there, my ex. So it was very difficult, and it is still difficult. So now my son still goes there. He still has friends there. My daughter kind of pulled away only because she found another church that she likes. We actually go to the church I counsel out of. And we also go to Cornerstone.
Which church is that? The
Free Methodist.
The Free Methodist.
In Greensburg, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Tim's awesome.
Tim Thunberg.
Tim is awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know Tim, he's great.
Oh yeah, my kids love him, and he's been a huge support for us as well.
Okay, so if you're looking for a great church in Greensburg, the Free Methodist Church,
I will name
Tim
that church,
Thunberg,
yes.
pastor. You'll have a great time there. You'll see Allison.
Yes.
So, and we invite people to church all the time, and we know the best churches. So. Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know why, but I always think of, because you were coming in today to do the podcast, and I was thinking about Word of Life. Mm-hmm. And, we all went there for a time during the the church lockdowns, and because it was the only church
the only one open. Yep.
And so sometimes we for a while, like, there was no church open, and we had church out in our driveway, and as soon as we could find a church, we went to it. Now, I know that brings up hard feelings for people, but I'll just be honest. That's what we did. And, we were also, we would have people who needed counseling.
Yeah.
And we were open the whole time.
Yeah.
And we had permission from the government and everything, to do that, you know. But yeah, like we went over to Word of Life, and I just, that was always interesting to me, because there was a time where, people were mad at Word of Life.
Oh, they were very upset over all that. Yeah.
And it was like on the national news.
Yeah.
And were you there during that time, or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just an amazing thing. Like, talking about trauma, like I still can't get it out of my mind, like how weird those times were.
Yeah. Well, that was a huge time of isolation. And, again, when you're forced into isolation, you don't like it.
Yeah.
But, whenever you're feeling hurt, you don't want to be vulnerable, so you isolate on your own. And it's interesting, what you really need is more social interaction, or at least the right kind, I should say.
Yeah, and we find that people, after having their, being scared out of their brains for 3 years, there's a big aftermath to that. But, not that I want to get into that. I just think that I love Pastor Tom and all those, and my youngest daughter still goes there too. So she's she loves that, and we love that they love her, and they've been really great.
Yeah, they are. They are.
So okay, so just wanted to mention that I wanted to talk about, like, we had some articles from nature versus nurture. Is this falls under that topic? So one of the big questions of psychology, and I used to present this to my psychology class, and they'd be like, "We don't care." So,
wow.
Like, really, I don't know. Like when I say to you, Alex, nature versus nurture, one of the big, most important questions. Scale of 0 to 10. You probably say 10, because he's grown up in my house.
This is a dinner table conversation. So,
I'm sure you were thrilled.
How about you, Gary? Do you, when I say the nature versus nurture debate, that one of the biggest questions of our time, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you care about that?
5. I
think 5. He's being polite.
Yeah, that was like a 5 as question mark 5. So and that's probably the topic, or the reaction that I got out of that class. Very intelligent students. So are you? Do you know a lot about this topic?
More than what I care to. Yeah. I mean, that's my answer on a scale of 1 to 10.
Thank you, Allison. That's good. So let's bring up on that article is, what is that article that we have? Big tech CEOs. And I'll show you this too. All right. So this is from this big tech CEOs meet with psychiatry's leaders to decide the future of mental health. So we want to, just in our podcast, give something for people to think about that will let them know, about psychology, and to think about that critically in a way that would benefit them. So this is something that's a current event in the news, and this author, he says, I'm a mental health professional in training. And so this is something that September of last year, the Psychiatry Academy of Massachusetts General Hospital hosted the Future of Mental Health Conference, FOMHC. And it was conducted by all these like big heavy hitters, MDs, PhDs, the most important people in psychiatry and psychology, to say, this is where we're going. And it's really important. So if you scroll down a little bit, he says the future of mental health is often condensed into 3 primary categories: digital mental health innovation, psychedelic medicine, and data science disruption. The overall vibe of the panel discussion and keynotes were expressing significant optimism and belief in cutting-edge approaches to tackling society's mental health perils. So to summarize this, the biggest minds in psychiatry are coming together, and what are they saying? Any guesses? It tells you in this article is pretty long, and I don't want to misstate it, but it was something about there's this term that they keep on using. You scroll down a little bit, and it is I'm not going to be able to find it, but that artificial intelligence is going to allow us to zero in and find specifically, like we're going to be able to look into the deepest parts of the cell, and we're going to discover.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The cause, the true cause, and then it goes off in a weird direction. Like, what are we going to do once we find the cause?
Exactly. That's what I'm wondering. Does that mean you're going to weed it out?
Well, yeah, this sort of goes in the direction. Well, we can. There's going to be a huge boom in psychedelics. I don't know how we get there.
That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting they were going to say we were going to manipulate the genes and everything.
Well, that's there too, of course. We're going to finally find a way to manipulate the genes and find better treatments. But they bring up this problem that when they look about this optimism, the author is saying, well, maybe in fairness, let me restate where this article is at. It is like they're going to use artificial intelligence to zero down into the cell. They're going to find it and be able to do genetic research and medicinal treatment. It's finally going to be successful. The people who are critical of this say that there's worsening treatment outcomes despite increased treatment. That's one issue. Second, the DSM-5 diagnostic system is a bad system. Mm-hmm. So the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, now in the 5th edition, we'll talk about what that means. And 3, this whole idea of chemical imbalance theory is just a theory, and it's not correct.
Yeah, and that is a theory.
Right. It's never been proven, and there's more now information out there that says it's not right.
Yeah.
And that's a big scandal.
Yeah.
So that's the whole nature versus nurture debate. So this person who's writing the article is a PhD student, a student of psychology. And I think that I sort of mixed this up, but I think in the article he's saying, you know what, we should go in the promising direction of things like psychedelics. And so that will also encapsulate the medical marijuana and all of this. Now, I don't want to get on a bandwagon about this, so Alex, keep me off of it if I go too far. Okay. We're not endorsing any of those things, but we're not talking about that today. So the nature versus nurture debate is, am I born this way? And that would be nature. Is this biology? And nurture is it the environment? Is my relationships causative? And which one ultimately is more important? You have some people like these folks who say we are going to. It's the biological cause that we need to find is going to be the best thing, and right now they're sticking to medication is the best that we've done. So, I don't really want to talk about medications today because we've covered that. Yeah, basically, our approach at CCA is we're not medication averse, and it's about 30% of the public is taking some type of medication, psychiatric medication. So our approach here is we would like to see if there's the least amount possible for the least amount of time. That is going to be the best for just about everybody.
Yeah.
And because medications are overprescribed, a lot of times that can be brought down to zero if the right kind of things are going on in your life, and that can start with counseling, can start a journey towards that. So we're optimistic about that. But the DSM-5 I thought would be, and diagnosis would be something I would get you like a lot of times. People want to know what their diagnosis is, and the counselor has to come up with a diagnosis, and a lot of times in our staffing groups, or people are very interested to talk about a diagnosis. What are your thoughts about that? What do you think? What do you think about the DSM?
I hate it.
You hate it? Have you read the DSM-5?
Oh yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah. Well, I have to, but
Yes.
I mean, we had to write basically paraphrase every single category in school, which was extremely frustrating.
You had to paraphrase every category.
Yeah, we had to go through and write the word isn't syllabus for some reason. The word has totally left my mind. But we had to paraphrase it and write each one, and we weren't allowed to copy. So we had, in other words, we had to really know it, and we had to be able to, use different words interchangeably to show that we understood each category.
Very nice. That must have taken a long time.
It was very frustrating. Yes. It's a growing concern at Liberty University in the clinical mental health program. Yes. But I don't like the DSM. I think people rely on it too much, and to me, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. A word, a phrase, really.
Yeah, so a lot of people would maybe say you don't believe in science.
I wouldn't say that.
Right. That's not what you're saying. And there's just a lot of skeptics, a lot of criticism about the DSM-5. So, the first thing that I would say is that when you're looking for a diagnosis, that diagnoses are used professionally to help people communicate. And that means that if you go to counseling here, we'll agree on a category, then it gives another clinician a starting point. And, it does involve this suggestion that we would investigate that and continue to try to move towards something that is accurate, and that's a good way of communicating between professionals. It also, does bring about a systematic approach that I have to, look at these things. There's some validity to that, and that's all positive, as you've had a history of people doing things within the field that have no validity at all. Although they hide behind lab coats and say, listen to me.
Yeah.
And that this article is critical of that, saying, the biggest minds in psychiatry are saying, we're going to find it. But if you read between the lines, what they're really saying is, it's been all this time and we haven't found it.
Yeah.
And now we're going to promise you again, keep buying our products. And so there's a lot of people out there who say, psychiatry needed medication. Because, like, say, for instance, up until the 70s, they were still doing lobotomies. What is a lobotomy? They, if they could diagnose you as crazy or psychotic or schizophrenic, the treatment was to cut out a piece of your brain, and it would be the cure. You would be a changed person. And they stopped doing it because the change was, it just made you really passive, and you could be stuck in a corner, and your life was pretty much over.
Yeah.
It completely ended your ability to deal with real life. It's not good to cut out a chunk of your brain.
You'd think they would have known that.
Yeah, and through like the 30s and 40s and 50s, you had Dr. Ice Pick, who would come in and stick an ice pick through your eye and say, I can do the surgery in 10 minutes. And
who was that famous case where the guy had the tent spike go through his head? Or no, it was the not the tent spike, but the rail yard.
I'll look him up now.
The railroad tie thing. Yeah,
or something.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. If you mention his name, I'm gonna think of it.
Phineas Gage.
Phineas Gage.
Railroad tie through the head.
So railroad tie through the head, and this was part of the nature versus nurture debate. So when you learn that, they talk about Phineas Gage, who he was working on the railroad. I think it was like 1800s, early 1900s.
Yes, we got Wikipedia.
Here we go. Wikipedia. Phineas Gage lived from 1823 to 1860. Was an American railroad construction foreman. And you can see there, if we can zero in on the skull, that'll be good for our folks to see, that he was tamping down like an iron into a rock that had explosives in it, and the explosives hit a spark, and very quickly that rod went completely through his head, went in through his cheek, and out towards the top. And you can see here, like in this picture, his eyes closed because it damaged his brain. And so this was a guy who, he was popular, charismatic, leader, respected in the community, always on time, gentleman. And after the accident, the first amazing thing was he survived. And he was completely changed. He would like flip out on you, swear at you. He was never on time anymore, lost his job, and his personality was completely changed. And so people would point to Phineas and say, well, if things aren't biological, then why couldn't he be normal? And he couldn't. He died that way. And no amount of therapy was going to help. Although they didn't have the therapeutic movement yet. He would have ended up at an institution. So we have examples like this. So he was a case study, and you have people who have strokes, and they will never be the same again as it damages a part of their brain. And so this would be another example that we would take, is that sometimes things have an organic cause.
Alzheimer's.
You have Alzheimer's, a brain tumor, dementia.
Yeah.
These are things that definitely would be a use for medication. As the brain is not going to function the way it is anymore. And so, that's part of the debate, and places where if there's a place of your brain missing, you're going to need some help to make that function in any kind of normal realm. And that would be a justification. The pain that it is now and what's going to happen to you as you're so dysfunctional that you're insane. That maybe we could reduce that harm and pain. But
this was kind of used as the example for like what a lobotomy would do. It's kind of like if somebody's acting crazy, they would.
Well, they figured out the part of the brain that they could cut out that would make you docile.
Yeah.
But that was also, but what really psychiatry was they had all these types of experimental treatments, but they did not feel like they were a legitimate science or medical. And that was desperately what they were searching for. And so finally, when you have Thorazine, come up, finally we have, if we are doctors treating an actual disease, we need to have some type of cure. And here, when I give you this medication, it changes you, and we know it. And now, we're legitimate.
They wanted that physical proof.
Yep. So that brings us up to, the current that we have all these medications. We have 30% of the country on it, and so skeptics will say, okay, let's take this example. ADHD. And 5% of boys, 3% of adolescent boys demonstrate extreme hyperactivity, inattention, impulsivity. Those are the categories. So the skeptics will say distraction, being fidgety, impulsive, sounds more like a disorder caused by a Y chromosome. To them, because 3 times more boys than girls are diagnosed with ADHD. So is it just, somehow boys are genetically inferior? How would we explain that? So there's a lot of people who are upset about ADHD.
And I think that's changing too, because there are more girls getting diagnosed now than ever before.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, it's still.
But theirs is more intrinsic. It's more the hyperactivity and the thoughts, and not being able to maintain focus. It's not so external, and I think that's why I just had a woman not too long ago, around my age, tell me she just got diagnosed with it.
Adult ADD.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. What do you think about the ADHD diagnosis in the DSM? And this is controversial, so I think you're allowed to have your opinion professionally. Hopefully, and anybody who finds this counter, we're just going to discuss it.
I think we've come to a place where we use diagnoses as an excuse, and I don't like that. We can use diagnoses as a guide, and I think that's what the DSM should be. Really, I think it should be a guide. I don't think it should be, you are this, you have this is your life, accept it, and excuse away all your behaviors because you have this. I don't think that's healthy.
Is there a way to, I'm just getting distracted by that. Thank you. Was that bad to mention that on camera? Gary, am I allowed to?
While we're talking about ADHD,
I got a little distracted.
Do you have
there.
anything to share?
maybe I'm qualifying.
Yeah, maybe.
It was very impulsive. It was very distractible.
Christian Counseling Associates is ready to serve you, providing a wide range of counseling services. Christian counseling is accessible to everyone. We serve both Christians who want their faith integrated into the counseling process, or those holding any beliefs or attitudes toward spirituality. With many years of counseling experience, our counselors are professional, licensed, highly trained, and rooted in their commitment to their church and communities. CCA is able to provide a full range of clinical counseling services. For more information, visit our website at www.ccawpa.com.
I'll share a little bit personally. My daughter's being evaluated right now for ADHD.
Okay. So this is personal.
A little bit. She has behaviors, and I think it has a lot to do with the trauma more than anything else. But she is in denial of that, which is fine. That's where she's at right now. Maybe as she gets older, she'll, move into that and work on that more. But anyway, she even said to me, "Why bother with the diagnosis? What's it going to do?" And I agree with her to an extent. What does it mean? Well, for one, because of the world that we live in now with the DSM, we have to have, a diagnosis in order to get treated for this, in order to get treated for that. She's going to need that if she goes to therapy. They know to give the techniques to help her. Like you said, carrying on, it goes on from clinician to clinician. However,
so you would be in the camp that if I can define the issue, then I can start to mold behavior.
Partly. Okay. Partly it is to understand a little more about yourself and know that you're not alone, that other people, deal with the same thing. Okay.
Like we mentioned before.
Yeah. Yeah. To know, I'm not isolated. I'm not weird because I do this a certain way or I do that a certain way. There are other people who deal with this and who think this way or act this way. Yeah. So it's not necessarily to normalize it and excuse it, but to say, okay, I'm not alone in this. Now, we go back to that I said earlier, instead of asking why, could move into now what? So now what? I've been diagnosed with this. I have this thing or whatever. I have all these behaviors. Other people have it too. What has helped them? now what can I do?
Yeah.
And it's moving beyond, just the diagnosis.
Well, and that's probably like one of the main criticisms of the DSM is that there's diagnosis or category overlap. Mm-hmm. So it could be, and you just sort of mentioned it. This could be impulsivity, or it could be reactions to triggers. It could be trauma, and really, when you match up these categories, they look the same. So it just depends on what the clinician thinks. Yeah. And but at the same time, like you're saying, like what we were talking about before, this helps the person not feel alone, and that could be helpful.
Okay. But then again, like we were saying earlier, overdiagnosis.
Yeah.
And prescribing medications to get rid of the behaviors instead of dealing with it and learning to adjust your life to help yourself.
Hey, Rich. All 3 of my kids were diagnosed with ADHD.
Can people hear you on camera?
I can hear me, so I'm sure they can.
Okay. So this is Gary, our technical producer.
Brooke took both Ritalin and Adderall.
Yeah.
She lost tons of weight. I took her off of it.
Yeah.
Alex was on Adderall, and he suffered migraine headaches.
Yeah.
And I took him off the medicine. Daniel was never on medicine. I refused to put him on it. And he's in 12th grade, and he's practically a straight A student. So I have reservations when it comes to diagnosing children with ADHD.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that this is controversial because a lot of people have a lot of personal experience with it.
Yeah.
And, I definitely, I believe that I probably would have been diagnosed with something like this as a kid, but in the school that I was in, that just wasn't being done.
Yeah.
But you fast forward to the same school that I went to now, you have the medication line out the door, or at least that was happening at some point, where people, like everybody is diagnosed with that. And, maybe my concentration's not the best. It's just not, so I'm like a slow reader, and I have a PhD, and I've read a lot of books.
It doesn't stop you. So I think that ADHD kind of started as a way to explain and, I don't know what the word I'm thinking of, but maybe ostracize unwanted behaviors.
Well, that's what this, the class criticism. So, the statistics that I'm reading is basic level, like issues that are acknowledged for every psychology student. So more boys than girls, even though that it's not unheard of for girls to be diagnosed with that. It's just that you have energetic children in a boring environment, and their behavior problems. And so, it's this is what we do. We with ADHD, you could talk about that. I definitely think that if you're looking at medication, you okay?
Sorry. He got a little hyper.
Alex, are you looking for some ADHD medication? We don't make light of this. We have plenty of people who come here for ADHD diagnosis, and we would recommend that if it's of all possible that you would wait, to do that while you're developing. And to realize, and this is where the public is really going to disagree with me, is what all the classes of drugs that are given for ADHD, in my professional opinion, should be classified performance enhancing drugs. So it's unspoken about in our profession, but one of the drugs that are abused at the college level is Ritalin and its derivatives. You can buy it on the street, and there's a reason why. That if you really, really want to study for a test, if you really want to be interested in something that you should not be interested in, something that's super boring, you take some Ritalin, you're on board.
Yep.
However, it doesn't really, it just makes you feel better. And you can sit in the chair. There's a lot of debate on whether that really enhances your scores, over the long term. And what you're still faced with at the end is either I take this thing forever or I develop an ability to concentrate more. And a lot of that happens in childhood developmentally. Like, if I am not as good at something, I need to become better any way that I can. And, so, like I would say, like personally, like I'm not like a speed reader. I never will, but I found a way to win. And, not that that's the topic of today, but I could tell you about it, like how that happened for me. It was the product of many, many painful days of trying to get it right. And at the end of that, I got it right. And I'm keeping it going, to the glory of God. Praise God that I have that. I'm not trying to be proud about it, but I think that we can grow and we can become unstuck, and that's very controversial in the nature versus nurture debate, because the whole nature theme is going to be, no, you're born this way, and it's genetic, and we don't know where it is, but that's the justification to give you this drug. And so here, just to let people know that you're not gonna get hit over the head with a Bible when you come here. Although we will, we want to live by the Word of God and believe that can change everything. We have an ADHD evaluation here. We have a cognitive assessment, and it's performance based. So we're not going to ask you like, here, answer a whole bunch of yes or no questions. We have this, like, it's like a computer program that we can put in front of you, and you'll have to do all these tasks, and they compare where you are versus the whole country, where you should be and where you are. And that's defining. At least you know where you are on the scale. Yeah. And it gives you a starting point to say, here's where I need to get. And we can assess and reassess, and then set goals and put in place processes where we would expect to see growth. Yeah. In places like hyperactivity, inattention, impulsivity. And truth be told, these are 3 common behaviors. So that's another DSM issue, is that if we moved away, and again, we don't take a biological position, but we don't reject it. Not that we're going to see Phineas Gage come in, but we take a biopsychosocial, spiritual approach.
Yeah, it's a combination.
There could be things going on all over the place, and it's probably, unless you start to do things that have high risks of side effects, the biological part is hard to change. Yeah. It's changing in reaction to the other things. But, the DSM in 1952 compared to now, there's 300 diagnoses in the current edition. 5 times the number that was in the first edition. So what happened? And that was ADHD wasn't in there. That got produced, or you can say we discovered it. But the debate is, they didn't know that in the 1800s. And the old school people out there said, no, you just get paddled, or something worse. Yeah. And are we better now? Because you're not allowed to do that anymore. And so one of the things that we have here is we have family therapy and parenting. That, like, when you have a special challenge, you develop special techniques.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yep.
And along the way as counselors, we learn plenty of things that aren't normally done, but do not harm the relationship with the child. You know, and as a way of bringing people up who are dealing with a special challenge. And you know, I'm being very careful. Like, I don't have to stick a label on that.
Yep.
I could just say this is the challenge, and acknowledge that, and we can move forward and hope to become better. To be fair, sometimes that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not what we wanted. It's sad. Yeah, but for, like, you know, you mentioned, Gary, that all 3 of your kids are okay.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to Brooke's wedding here in a couple months.
Yep.
And you know, Alex and Daniel, you know, they're doing really good.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So those are the issues. I don't know, how are we doing on this topic? You
Doing good.
doing good? Producer. You know, so there's also the fact that 26% of adults meet criteria for a DSM diagnosis at any given time in our country.
I would say you could probably almost diagnose every single person with something from there.
Right. So when I say I could have had ADHD, I mean, there was a time in my life, especially 7th and 8th grade, that I could not, I didn't know how to study, I didn't want to study, and nobody could make me. You know, and maybe that's hard for some people to hear because I'm a fully educated person. You know, but I was not the student of the year, and my 9th grade year didn't go well. My 10th grade year, my 10th grade year started to get better, and that was the start of it. But it really took me until midway through college to really get it right, and that was it.
You think it was an attitude change or a behavior change?
It was an everything change. You know, part of the, I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on, you know, and there was a spiritual change. At 19, I acknowledged, and this was one of the biggest things, I was completely bored. And the reason why was because my whole profession and all of the studying that I had to do was set around making money. Yeah, so I was going to get this job in college. I was going to become rich, and it was all about desire too. Like, you know, desire was, of course, wrapped up in that. So, you know, I was going to get to do things that I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to learn anything. I just wanted to get the grade.
Yeah.
And if I could get that was my access into the life that I wanted. And when I was 19 and God showed me that I was to follow him, and I accepted that, I had to come to grips with all that was wrong. And so I had to, like, relearn my life. And at that point, I admitted I needed to learn something. And that at 19 was probably the first time that I really thought I needed to learn anything. I thought I knew it all. So these teachers, I was just like, you know, what am I going to use this for?
Yeah.
Now, you know, to come full circle, you know, one of the things I became good at was math, and I had rejected that. So I was in college, I had, like, failed math courses, and in my doctoral degree, I passed. I didn't only pass. I could say I got a B+ in intermediate statistics. So I had to go over out of the psychology department into the mathematics department at the PhD level. And everybody else from the behavioral sciences had quit the course. And I almost got an A in that course, along with the math geeks. And to me, I left there, and this might sound outrageous to some people. I believe I could not only pass any college course, but I could teach it at the undergraduate level. And that includes the things that I hated, which was chemistry, physics, and natural science. And I discovered a reason why you need to learn that, and why it's important, and it can now hold my interest, and I can understand it. But back then it was like I can't wait. I would count the minutes. The clock was like holding my attention more than a book or a lecture, and I dreamed of it ending. So I got lost in that explanation. But what was your question?
I asked if it was an attitude or a behavior change, but it was a combination of both. But it sounds like your values changed.
Yeah, like what was important had to change.
Yeah.
And so now, I really believe that education primarily is about learning the truth, and that I first had to value the truth to want to discover it, and that all of these, knowledge can get you deeper into how God designed everything. You can't ever figure it out, even close.
Yeah.
But you can move forward, and that's valuable.
Yeah.
And all these areas of discipline prepare you for leading society in a direction that is good. And that is why you should take up education and getting a degree. It's not to make money. And, if you're doing something that is full of purpose, then all those things God will take care of. And so we should try our best and leave that up to God. And if we're doing something valuable, the society will value it.
Yeah.
And your needs will be taken care of. They shouldn't be first. They should be second. Second to serving people. So that to me, like as a teenager, was the other way around. Like, society was here to take care of me.
Well, that's a teenage mindset usually,
Right. I was used to my parents taking care of me and all of that, so I couldn't see outside of that. And I'm not going to blame this on my family. I'm sure that they were trying to teach me that, but I was stuck.
Well, that's a part of that identity at that age, finding your identity. And some people grow out of that and some people don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would say that like all this labeling, diagnosis doesn't get at that at all. Really, another reason why we diagnose is because the field requires us to. And, we have to do it. And it has to be accurate according to what the field demands. But I did mention this, that 46% of people during their lives will meet criteria at the current level of the DSM-5 for a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So the critique is this is supposed to be something that's abnormal. But if you're at 46%, are you abnormal to get a diagnosis? And so also we know psychologically, once I say this is who you are, especially when somebody's vulnerable, it becomes their identity.
Yeah.
So there's this self-fulfilling prophecy. If I say you have ADHD or you're a bad kid, which I was told a lot, you begin to say, well, maybe they know what they're talking about. That's me. And then you go and do that. So like what's really going on once we put that label down on somebody? And for us, like, people will come here and they'll say, call me Dr. Hoffman. They trust me. And I think it's for kids, it's like, it's hard to overcome, like to disagree with somebody who you respect.
Yeah.
And that's something that'll happen here in these labels is, well, that person must be right. Even though I disagree, they must know what they're talking about.
I think it also carries this idea that they're special because they're different.
And it makes me special. Now I can be accepted as this. So...
that's a part of it. And that's not to take away that, people really do have some of these diagnoses, but then there's some people who crave that because for some reason they're not getting love, attention from somewhere or somebody. And so they want that to make them feel validated, to make them feel accepted. Like you said, I'm part of that group now or whatever. And we see that a lot in teenagers, a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because that, I think the goal of that is to alleviate anxiety and depression, but I think in the long run, it's making them more anxious and depressed. Because like you said, they're stuck in it and they feel like they can't get out of it. And they just accept this is how life is.
For sure. Yeah. So we went really deep into this DSM topic and diagnosis, and that's a part of the nature versus nurture debate. And I hope the people watching, it's probably way more than you would ever get in counseling, but if you're coming to counseling, you should understand that. What is the correct place of what this label is? And what I would say for the people who come here, we're going to do that accurately, but we're going to put it in a place where it could be useful to you. We're going to be careful that it doesn't become your identity. It's just going to become a guiding measure that we can start to set some functional goals. We can come up with a plan that you're going to understand, and we're going to be able to walk alongside you, that you're going to not feel alone. We're going to start moving in a direction, and we're going to hope to become unstuck and start to grow again. Yeah. And so again, I think we're cautious because there's so much around this in the controversy, and some people say, "Oh, you're making a big deal," but I really do believe in the DSM-5. You just really got to be careful with the direction that's going, and there needs to be some diagnosing and labeling, but you can overdo it and you can succumb to it too. So you're going to get here from all of our counselors. You're just really going to get the best in how that should be handled. And Allison, your discussion about it, I think, is very helpful to anybody who would engage in that.
In researching out different places to go in my internship, I've been in a pastoral position for many years, and I have a lot of experience coming in, but not in the counseling profession. So coming here, I was able to integrate my faith and my biblical principles into the counseling practice in an environment that was very supportive and encouraging. I was able to use the techniques and the modalities that I learned in my counseling school as evidence-based practices and have the faith integrated into those. And that was so important to me because my faith informs how I live. So this was a necessity for me in my internship and in my future to be able to put that into my practice. In the internship process, it's a wonderful opportunity to grow and expand your knowledge and put into practice what you've learned. My experience has been wonderful. It's been a great, awesome experience. I feel supported. I feel encouraged. I feel that I'm given opportunities to grow further in my career and in my faith also, so that's very important too. I've had a great experience at Christian Counseling Associates. You can too. Come grow with us.
Yeah. Which you can't blame people for that, because if it is easy to fix, like you said, you go to the doctor, you tell them your symptoms, you get diagnosed, they give you a pill, there you go. Yeah. That would be great. But ADHD, the things of that nature aren't necessarily cured with, psychedelics or any kind of, pill.
No, you're going to be in that cult movie.
I think too, what we were kind of talking about, well, in the 1800s they didn't really need this, but I like to look at, if you look at the Industrial Revolution and how things changed from the physical labor needed to perform jobs, and your ability to sit down and concentrate on tasks was much more needed. And then you look at, the 2000s, children's programming, TV became so much more accessible. And I'm not sure if I can remember the institute, but the Pediatric Institute, the Christian Pediatric Institute talks about how children's program will wear down a child's ability to pay attention, because it will change frames every 3 seconds. So that's why they only recommend watching maybe an hour a day, 2 hours a day for a kid. And then you see in 2010 the rise of social media, and kind of that they did that whole documentary on Netflix about the guy who invented the Facebook like button, and how how that was built to draw and keep your attention. So now you have that constantly in your pocket. So things like school, if in the 1970s there wasn't there wasn't an immediate distraction to draw your attention, maybe that was in your pocket.
I just got distracted. I found out what that movie was called. Jesus Camp.
Jesus Camp.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that?
I didn't see it. No. Now I'm gonna have to look it up.
That was it. It just took an hour to get there, but the modern world in many ways, I wouldn't want to go back to the 90s or the 80s, really. There's things I love about the modern world, but it's also very toxic. And so all this social media stuff we know is bad. TikTok, terrible. It's going to make your kids depressed. And the quickness of the media, juices your mind up that you cannot tolerate slow moving things. And people don't spend time outside anymore. They're checking their phones like 25 times a minute. And they're used to being distracted. So there's training that goes on, and they're socially disconnected. Like all these factors, if you start to put them back in, and I do remember, best friend in childhood. His name was Keith. He could throw a baseball like 98 miles an hour, and he was always just a little bit from getting onto like a professional team. We go out and watch him. You didn't have to practice nothing, But he did not like school. He could do anything physically that you wanted him to do. And to this day, he's been a success for that. But people put him down on that. And, because we were all going to college. Well, now we're getting to the place again where we're acknowledging everything is valuable, the skill trades.
Yeah.
And, there's some people, who just, they're not going to be in the books all the time, and that's fine.
And I think that's okay. But our culture, like our school culture, like you were saying, we're supposed to be, paying attention. That's the thing. Yeah. So it's difficult for kids who they're not wired that way. Like you said, it was hard for you. You had to retrain yourself. Yeah. My daughter's that way. She's extremely creative, like artist 100%. Yeah. And she's really had to struggle with school. Now, thankfully, she's able to work through some of that because she's in a different school, and that's helped. But, they give her that space. She needs to leave the room. She leaves the room, and she comes back. Yeah. But it's, like you said, with the Facebook and TikTok. Did you know that Pittsburgh public schools are suing the social media? Yeah, they're suing them because it creates anxiety and depression in kids.
Yeah, and I just think that, talking about like the baseball that Keith played, that could be drawing his mind away. It could be drawing him maybe like to do something later, but now you have access to something in your pocket that is immediate. Like it's like, I could just pull this out and go, or I could just get right back to it. So it's just like, how much more is that, wearing down the attention that people have, or the interest that they have in school?
Everything is quick.
Yeah.
So one of the things I don't want to ever return to is, when I was a kid, I remember, the hot dogs took like 15 minutes to cook before you could eat hot dogs.
Wait a minute. How old are you?
No, I was, we were one of the first people in the neighborhood to get a microwave. And like when you could put a hot dog in there, 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. People were like, there's what's that? And now people, nobody would wait 15 minutes for anything to eat. You can get everything in 2 minutes. Like the food I eat for lunch, which I love, would have took me a half hour, and I can heat it up in 2 minutes and eat it. It's the best thing. Life has changed, and some of that is messing with our minds. And so when we catch people, coming in and it's just really breaking them down, we can develop a plan and be creative and come alongside people, and they can begin to grow again. I think that kids are going to grow if you don't jam them into something that is not made for them to do, and that's part of our counseling is to really try to assess like what is the best, and I think you can get there. And then and that's all part of this nature versus nurture debate. So I'm glad, I hope that some people will listen to this and start to think there's more than one way to do something. And with how complex people are, and if you listen to some of the things that we talked about, it's complex. It's not just like here take this, or do this, it's going to be a process. And, so hopefully that gives people some ideas today. And I appreciate everything that you've said, and shared today. I hope that you'll come back and be a guest on the podcast again. And maybe it would be good to just pray for the people who, are really touched by these issues that are maybe dealing with some of the same things. Would you do that for us to end us today?
Yeah. Father, I thank you for this time, God, to talk about the complexities of our hearts and complexities of our mental struggles. And Lord, I just pray that for those who are hurting from trauma, those who are dealing with any kind of abuse, Lord, that you would let them know they're not alone, and that they don't have to stay stuck where they're at. Whether they're still in the situation or they're out of it, they can move on and find freedom and healing in you. And Father, we pray for the stigmatism that sometimes comes along with different diagnoses, and how sometimes we take that on as a part of our identity. And Lord, I just pray that you would help people to see that our identity is found in you. It's not found necessarily in our behaviors, in our thoughts, that it is found in you, and that we are created to know you and to love you, and to be loved by you, most importantly. And Lord, I just pray you would help anyone who's struggling and has questions, Lord, that they're able to seek out and get help in whatever area of life that they're in. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Allison Smith, CCA counselor in Greensburg, thanks for being with us today. Folks, thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.